Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. Gaming has taken our country by storm if numbers are anything to go by. Online game development companies in India actually rose to 275 in 2019 from a mere 25 in 2010. But if 2019 is seen as the year gaming actually went mainstream in India, 2020 and COVID is when its user base completely surged. With a projected user base of more than 628 million gamers and an industry that's expected to be over $1 billion worth by 2021, according to Google KPMG, online gaming in India is suddenly a hot topic. Equally, though, is the threat of security, privacy, and most importantly, safety. The average age of children who enter the gaming universe is getting younger and younger. Gaming addiction, implementing self-checks, has any of that actually been addressed in the Indian market? Joining me to talk about that are Girish Menon, who is the lead for media and entertainment at KPMG, and Jyotsna Mohan Bhargava, who's an author whose recently released book, Stoned, Shamed, Depressed, explores the issues that India's urban teens are struggling with at this point, one of the most important amongst them being gaming addiction. Girish, thank you for joining in. It's that headline number in your report that's really got everyone to sit up and take attention, more than $1 billion. And it's almost like, it's an industry that was sleeping for a while, or at least not addressed or looked at that carefully. Tell me why you see the 1 billion opportunity in gaming.
Right. So I think two, three things in terms of how you look at gaming in India, right? I think first point to keep in mind is while gaming has always been there for a while, right? It's basically the last 3 to 4 years where we've seen an exponential growth in the user base for gaming, right? I think that's point one to keep in mind. The second important thing to keep in mind is when you look at gaming, you got to look at two broad numbers, right? One is the users, right, and the the elements around that, and the second is the monetization ability of that user base, and therefore what kind of market size that you end up at, right? So when you look at the user base, right, if all the drivers that sort of required for this user base to grow rapidly has been in play in India for the last 4 years, right? Whether it is 4G connectivity through all the telcos and and getting that pushed out into the market in a very deep manner, or smartphone penetration, or a general increase in digital behavior across users and across demographics, right?
Sure.
All of that has essentially meant that as consumers are spending more and more time on their mobile phones, right, gaming is a very natural corollary outside of social media and WhatsApp for them to spend time on, right? And that is basically at a very core level, where the user base for gaming in India has been increasing exponentially, right?
Yeah.
What is changing along with that is the whole supply side. Gaming has always been a fairly robust ecosystem globally. Plus, in India, that supply has also been growing pretty dramatically, and that has meant that there is enough and more for gamers to do and play there. And an important thing to keep in mind, and this is where the second part of my point comes into play, is that most of the gamers in India are casual and hyper casual gamers, right? When you look at globally and the global markets, gaming is a very large play globally, but a lot of that is driven by paid products by guys who are mid-core, hardcore gamers, right? And also the ability of these guys to pay even for casual games is fairly high, both culturally as well as from a ability to pay perspective. In India, the situation is different. So when you look at the numbers that we've quoted, and we had about 90 billion rupees in FY20 as the size, and then that going up to 100 plus, even in a year like this where we're going through a COVID situation, you got to understand that the nuance is different when it comes to monetization. The money in gaming in India actually comes from what we call as real money games, right? Which is basically your rummy, your poker, your teen patti, as also fantasy sports, right? Which is your dream 11s of the world, right?
Right.
This is where people are willing to actually pay money and play, right? And that has meant that these segments have a disproportionate share of the monetization, and they are what's actually driving monetization in the last 2 years in India, right? The casual gaming segment is largely dependent on advertising in India, right? And that is a model that is growing and growing well as brands become more cognizant of what digital media can do and what gaming in particular can do for brands. While that is changing, it's still early days when it comes to monetization, and that's the point I said why it is only a 3-4 year old market, right? So while the users are coming from casual games, the monetization is coming from real money games, and I think it's going to be, and this sort of augurs well for the industry in the long term, because over time you may assume that real money games will sort of starting to stabilize and plateau out, but casual games are where you will see a big growth in the future, and that's what will give you your monetization. So that's how you should sort of look at these these numbers in the market size.
Sure. Let's look at this, the point about users that you're making, Girish. Jyotsna, till 2017, let me come to you with that figure. The gamers, or India's online gamers, aged between 18 to 30 to 24. That's the age range we had. Has that age range changed? Has that subset changed significantly?
So, yes. In a nutshell, yes, because what I actually found was that, the gaming again, it's a bit like social media, as Girish also said, right? The laws are also pretty much similar in the sense that the age is 13, 14, to get onto Instagram. It's pretty much the same for Fortnite and stuff. But the kids are going all around it, the way they're going around Instagram and, Snapchat. So it's pretty much, I've seen so many children who were 9, 10, all on Fortnite, and, instances like, okay, we're playing, but then there's stuff like, they're getting nightmares, they think they're getting chased in the corridors, because, obviously if we're not looking at that age, we're not looking at the amount of time they're playing, because we still consider it to just be a game, just something that is entertaining our children, but we're not looking at the fact that the whole dynamics have changed, that there are certain aggressive games as well, there's certain things of violence in it, that the children as young as 9, 10, then they're taking it with them, then they're waking up in the middle of the night feeling like they're being chased, and there are a whole lot of repercussions that are happening. But yes, like I found with a lot of other things in my book, and Mitali, I actually wrote the chapter on gaming right in the end, thinking that it's going to be like the lame one of everything else. But when I finished, my editor and I, we were shocked at the kind of things we came across, and the biggest one was that the epicenter has changed from a 17, 18-year-old who's playing with his friends to 10-year-olds who are completely addicted to 9, 10, 11, being that main age group where kids are playing unlimited Fortnite, PUBG. I think PUBG was bigger in India before the ban and stuff, and I'm sure they'll still go around it. All the kids are so confident that they'll go around all the bans right now. So it's a very different playing game, I feel, right now.
Yeah, and I want to talk, of course, more deeply about safety and security. But Girish, just to slice these numbers so we understand, the size of what we're talking about here, confirm for me whether this is indeed where it's at. Gaming app downloads are now at 3 billion annually. Is it at that, or is it higher? A, and B, on the point that you were making about ARPUs for gamers, the average revenue, has that context changed? Like, where would it circle at now for India?
So if you look at the size of the market itself in terms of the number of downloads, right? So that's a number that has gone up. So the number of 3 billion that you're talking about sounds there and thereabouts right to me. I think where what is changing is, like I said, the model of monetization is starting to change. So, for example, if you look at the casual game side of the equation, I think ARPUs are starting to go up now, and that is happening for for a couple of reasons, right? I think first is that in-app purchases, right? This is a critical element, because globally casual gaming is actually driven more by in-app purchases and less by advertising. In India, that is not been the situation. In-app purchases historically was single-digit numbers. That number is starting to change quite a bit, and during the whole lockdown phase, it actually went up even more. But our general sense is that it's probably now reaching closer to about 15% of the casual gaming revenues. And as that sort of picks up, you will see more traction on ARPUs going up, because ad spend, while it will grow, it has its own trajectory and own challenges in a market like this that you're facing. But the in-app purchases is actually growing, and I think that's got a lot to do with the more deeper demographics, and including the children that was just mentioned, and the fact that during the whole lockdown phase, because people had very little else to do, people were more willing to spend, right? The concern really is this sustainable? Is this growth sustainable? Are these ARPU levels sustainable? Our sense is that some of it is, right? I think we are sort of establishing a new normal when it comes to gaming in India. I think people who never played games before are now playing. People who used to play before are playing more. As time becomes a constraint going forward, a lot of the borderline guys will drop off. Some of the time spent metrics will come down, but we are definitely looking at much higher levels of user base as well as monetization as compared to what we've been used to seeing in the past.
Ali, if I can just add a little bit to what Girish was saying here about the in-app, purchases as he was talking about, and that's something a lot of kids also actually spoke to me about, and they, for them that's the temptation. They say, we get tempted by the fact that we think firstly that the in-app purchases to begin with are free, so that's how it's being marketed to these kids. They think, okay, and so it basically sucks you in a way for these children who think that, we're getting, we're getting a little bit of freebie, we'll get like that little point, or we'll move up a stage. And then as you progress further, what's happening is you have to put in the money. And then it becomes like this vicious circle going in. Then you're stuck because, you're putting in the money, or you're trying to get in money from your parents, or you're sneaking in the money, or you're sneaking in the money to get into another stage, because then it becomes like an addiction. I mean, it is called a gaming disorder, right, by WHO. So I think that the ones that are getting affected the most are the young ones. They don't quite know how to harness it in a way.
Yeah. The numbers are also out there, Jyotsna. I mean, the effect of COVID shows that there's been a 24% increase in, online gaming between just February and March, and now we're already into October. But I want to respond to the point Girish was making about the fact that we don't really have professional gamers. Did you come across that, the fact that there is any subset that is being able to harness this in a more positive way, or do you think largely what's filtering down is pretty unmonitored and rather unsafe?
So I did speak to a couple of them who are doing it professionally. They're in their early 20s, and I think, but it's very, very rare right now in India. Not the way that it's happening abroad. Where a lot of parents are giving their kids, getting tutors to teach them Fortnite, so that they get on the ball and they get into this competition. So we haven't reached that stage yet. But as I say, we're a very aspirational country. Whatever happens, we catch up really quick, and right now on social media you're catching up double quick, right? You're pretty much on par. So it's not something that I don't think will never happen. I'm sure it will, but for now I think a lot of them are just playing for the sake of playing. They're telling me they're playing for 13 hours, 14 hours, and if we get a little bit of a headache, or we get a little bit of eye issues, or we get neck issues, that's collateral damage. It happens, I mean, it's the experience that we're looking at. And, so I don't understand that. And the fact that, of course, we're this big smartphone market now, right? I mean, about 859 million by the time 2022. So I think that console concept is also now very, very limited. You can just pick up that phone and start playing anywhere. And I think that is the big one. Anybody who has the smartphone now has the ability to just get on the game as early as you get a smartphone.
Yeah.
And if I actually may add a couple of things, right, to what Jyotsna just said, right? I think gaming has always had this challenge a little bit, right? Where, even globally in the Western markets, these problems persisted for quite a long time in terms of, unmonitored gameplay, right? Effectively by kids. And it took as late as maybe the 80s and 90s for games to even actually get rated, right? In the US, right? So now, if you, for example, if you play any of the games, whether it's on a Play Store or on an App Store, or you buy any of the more console games, right? There is a very clear rating mechanism, like you see in movies, that is sort of played out. Now, the point is, it took a while for even the West to sort of realize that there are repercussions to unmonitored play and uncontrolled play, right? I think what is happening over here, and it is a combination of 2 or 3 factors, right? I think in India, and this is generally been the case with everything technology driven, right? The infrastructure comes first, and it comes very quickly.
Policy
And yeah, then the users come in, right? And they, and we tend to leapfrog generations when it comes to user growth and on anything on technology, right? So that sort of happens. When that happens, you've got this huge ecosystem of creators who see the value of their users. So supply follows suit. Regulation, monitoring, all of that comes right at the end, right? And it's unfortunate, but it's also the reality of how it has, most technology events have sort of evolved in India, right? What this also means is that I think, so that is one key element that we need to keep in mind as to why all of this is happening, right? The second piece is also, this just has got worsened because of the whole COVID lockdown situation, right? You got parents sitting at home, they've got to work, the child is at home, you cannot send them down to play, they don't go to school. What do? Right? It's either television or a mobile phone, right? In a situation like that, my personal view is a lot of this needs to also be a monitoring at the parents level. But, like I said, a combination of factors is just sort of loosening that entire monitoring mechanism.
Right.
And I think unless some form of parental monitoring and sort of comes into play, there is going to be a way to sort of control this. Because if you look at the gamers, or rather the suppliers, they've made it very clear that, for example, if there's a Fortnite, very clearly the people who are supposed to download it, the age profiles are mentioned. But like you said, people will find a way around it, right? And that has been going on forever. So I think somewhere that balance clearly is needed. Part of it, also can be from the supply side in terms of how do you create content and how do you create age limits and other kind of restrictions which prevents, from a software perspective, prevents kids from sort of playing this. Yeah. But also at the same time, I think there is some level of monitoring at the user end that is required, which sort of will help balance this a little bit. But at the end of it all, it is about, I think it's boiling down to a situation about how do you manage this reality, because it's not going to change, right? You will have more mobile phones, you will have more connectivity, you will have more games, you will have more gamers, yeah. Right? So that's not going away anywhere. So the question is, how do you manage a situation like that? And, particularly with kids, how do you sort of manage their well-being? Is something that we need to think from that angle, rather than thinking that, okay, maybe I can do something to control the gaming universe. I think that is not really possible. The ecosystem is open, so there's no way you can really do anything around that.
Yeah, I want to swivel for a bit though, Girish, from what's happening with the end users to what's happening with the game development companies. Till 2019, the count was at 275, which is an exponential jump from the last 2-3 years. What's happening, especially with the China lens attached, where a lot of games got banned and subsequent PUBG got banned. What is the potential for them here, and what are the 4 or 5 rock stars in that domain, names that you would watch out for from the gaming companies?
So just to the start, I wouldn't be comfortable naming names, okay, on this call. But that being said, let's just look at what's been happening, right? If you look at the market, in terms of the monetization side of the equation and the and the user side of the equation, I think you could broadly split the game developer side into 3 parts, right? There is the whole real money and fantasy sports game side of the equation, where yes, you have fairly sizable Indian companies doing very well. That ecosystem has been growing very, very rapidly on the back of legal judgments right from Supreme Court down about game of skill versus game of chance and all of that, right? So that ecosystem has been developing very, very well. If anything, my worry is that that's probably overcrowded, right? That part of the ecosystem is already overcrowded and probably will see some consolidation. When you come to the casual and hyper casual side of the game, of the gaming universe, it's a slightly trickier proposition. Most of the larger pieces of monetization is actually not Indian games, right? If you look at the if you look at the downloads that sort of tend to happen, most of the downloads, top downloads of casual games in India are whether it's a Candy Crush, whether it is a Angry Birds and multiple other, all of which are global products which have found resonance in India, right? Indian, if I recall, I think Ludo King was the only top 10 download ranked product that I am able to recall right now. But the size of the opportunity of the market is what is interesting game developers in India, right? So there is an exponential growth that is happening in number of developers that are coming through, and whether that is focused on casual, hyper casual, whether there's focused on Indian IPs being converted into games, movie IPs being converted into games, or generally Indianized versions or Indianized context to games. All of them, they see this huge opportunity in casual games, and therefore that ecosystem of developers is growing very, very rapidly. I think where we have a challenge in India with scale for those developers, right, is the fact that you can, if you have a good team and if you have a good concept, you can build a great game, right? But that is only 30% of the battle, right? You need to market big and wide, and you need to distribute it, right? Because if you go to Google Play, there are maybe 1 million games, right? How do you make yours stand out, right? How do you and in the same genre, how do you ensure that, because in most cases, the gameplays will be very similar to global games, right? It's a racing game. The genres are very reasonably, categorized. So you are also competing against those same global products, right? So how do you make yourself stand out? That means that there's a significant amount of investment that is needed post creation. And I think with the size that the Indian market is in today, those investments don't exist yet, and the scale of of those developers are therefore at a lower end, and they are struggling to scale up. Sure. But I think with the interest that we are starting to see from investors into India on gaming, I think that will change. I think we will see more Indian developers building scale, right? Not just creating games, but building scale and being able to distribute it at a mass level.
Jyotsna, when you look at the genre preferences, it actually looks quite harmless. The top ones that come up are puzzles, action and adventure games. What are these kids playing? When we're talking about the below 19 subset, and how violent are they?
So it's a mix. I think until PUBG was banned, I think PUBG was just the most, whatever anybody else will say, I think it was, across. So it was not just urban, it was, semi-rural, it was across, right? So there's a lot of PUBG, but it's this battle that I have with my daughter who wants to be on social media, and I don't let her be, and she's like, everybody's on Instagram, and I tell her, there's going to be a new app in another year. It's not like you're going to miss out. Every year, every some month something new is coming out, and I think it's the same. So right now I think there's a lot of that Roblox that is all over, all these kids are on it, but there are a lot of violent games. There are a lot of violent games, not just violent games, there's a lot of all that pop-up chat that is going on, Mitali, which I think a lot of parents are hugely unaware of. And as Girish said, the parents have to take a little bit more involvement in this, because these pop-up chats. So, I spoke about grooming, and some parent turned around and said, "Oh, grooming, what does it mean apart from, looking well and dressing up natty?" So this is where we are at, right? You're leaving your kids out, and there's so much going on. These pop-up chats, a lot of these counselors told me that if it's a multiplayer game, if 100 players in that game, 40 of them will not be who you think they are. And it's all happening through these pop-up chats. They're trying to, groom you. They're trying to befriend you. They're trying to gain your trust. And then these conversations, they go offline, right? They go off to WhatsApp, which is where, it gets into like the whole predator thing, or, you're leaking out your nudes. All these things are so hugely interlinked as they are in social media. So, that's what I said when I said about gaming, the gaming, the repercussions, if the freedom to game at a young age is unrestricted, if we as parents have no idea what our child is doing, it's very, very scary, including minefield. You walk into it and the kids, and again, it's all about the pop-up chats. It's about leaving your mic open. So you're leaving yourself open to every kind of conversations that somebody else can hear outside. So I think there's a lot that needs to be looked into. Like, again, as Girish said, the checks and balances, they're not as they should be, at least for a minor generation. And I think for us, we need to really look hard into the whole concept of grooming. Grooming is so huge through gaming right now that it's so underestimated, Mitali.
Girish, let's talk about safety and security and laws. You mentioned the fact that some of these card games, etc., are the most popular in India. Betting and gambling laws are actually dictated by each state, but even within that, there's a difference between a chance game or an actual money game. Is Indian law basically traversing this entire universe in a very gray zone?
So I think what is needed is clarity of regulation. I think the laws that exist at a very, very core level are simple, right? It basically says gambling is not allowed. Yeah. Game of chance is not allowed, right? At a very overall level, right? There are certain states that may specifically allow, gambling or lotteries or whatever, but those are state subjects, right? At a very overall level, it's very simplistic. What this means, though, is that when you have real money games, they have to prove themselves that they are not a game of chance, right? So because we don't have regulations which clearly outlines what is a game of skill, right? You got to go with the proof is in the other way around. It's a negative proof, right? Where you got to prove that you are not a game of chance and therefore you are a game of skill. Yeah. And therefore you are allowed and you don't fall. And again, it's not that you are allowed. You're basically saying that because of that, you are not disallowed because gambling is disallowed, right? So it's a bit of it's a very unclear situation right now. Within that, you could theoretically argue every game you play is a game of skill because there is some skill involved, right? But there are certain games which are very, very clearly skill oriented, right? Where there is a lot of strategizing, there is a lot of thinking, and a lot of experience. All of that comes into play. A lot of research and analysis sort of comes into play before you can actually make yourself a good player, right? So which therefore means that over time, both when it comes to card games and fantasy sports games, models have evolved. These have got challenged in various courts, and now it's reached a situation where I think there is a clarity on what kind of skill games have been allowed by the Supreme Court, right, in their judgments, right? Whether those judgments pertain to individual companies or they pertain to wider situations, there is a little bit more clarity on the kind of models that fit into the definition of a game of skill, right? And what is therefore happening is that people in the whole RMG space have evolved their models to fit into those definitions and ensure that you are now can be categorized as a game of skill and therefore have your model sort of validated. The challenge that is arising that I see is One, because those definitions are relatively narrow in terms, it sort of means that everybody is pretty much doing the same thing or variants of the same thing in terms of the models that they come out with, right? Which means you may have 150 companies in fantasy sports, but more or less they offer similar products, right? Because you're not allowed to do anything different. So innovation tends to get curtailed a little bit, number one. The other risk associated with that also is that we are seeing newer and newer games coming in. So, for example, somebody offering a quiz game, somebody offering some other small minor skill involvement games as games of skills, right? These are gray areas. We don't really know at the moment whether it's allowed or disallowed, but the point is, unless it's challenged, right, you will not really know whether it's allowed or not. So I think regulation definitely needs more clarity over here, which will help, I think, all parts of the ecosystem.
Jyotsna, quick final word with you. There's law and then there's regulation. No industry wants to be regulated, and there's been talk about the gaming industry, looking at self-regulation, encouraging timeout. Can you really put the onus on an industry whose business is for people to play for more hours to generate more revenue? Is it going to work like that?
No, it never does, because obviously, an industry is going to put its hands in where they see that they're making profit, and they obviously are doing a pretty good job of it right now. And I always say that, I say even bans don't work. I think banning anything, PUBG has been banned for all the different reasons. It's not been banned for the fact that, it's been played by so many kids and that it's caused, it's caused suicides and stuff. It's not been banned for that, right? Anyway, a ban never helps anything. So I think, no, the onus is obviously lying at home. It's us. I think we need to be regulating what our children are watching, how much they're playing. And I think a lot of these games, because they're aggressive, and I think if we don't, as I say this for even social media, I think the earlier you start regulating, the better it is for you, because going in hindsight, fixing things when a kid is 15, 16, when you've given them that smartphone to play at the age of 10, taking it back is just not possible, because they are resisting it. They're getting so aggressive. I personally know somebody who's, they gave their child an iPad really early, 8, 9, 10, and I think the child is 13. He's got the cops at his doorstep because of the complaint, because of that aggression. Or, there have been instances where now the parents are trying to, not charge their child's smartphone because they don't want to play the game, but that. So, and the child has come and, hit the parent with that phone because why haven't you charged it? I need to play. So I think, we need to figure this out for ourselves. I keep saying this, that, as a generation, we always say that we're not very tech savvy, but that's not good enough anymore. I think we have to be for our children to harness it in a better way.
Fantastic speaking with you both. Thank you so much for adding so much rich perspective to this industry that I frankly didn't know that much about, but this is the one to watch going into the next few years. Girish and Jyotsna, thank you again for joining in today.
Thank you so much, Mitali.
Thanks, Mitali. Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.